It's just personnel, the reserve, gender reserve.
Okay. The meeting will come to order. On the agenda, we have one addition to the agenda that we'll announce right now. At the close of our regular session today, we will be going into closed session to consider candidates for village manager. And with that, as a resident, we're now open to residents, as a resident, as well as a council member. I want to note, and let the record note and the minutes note, that tonight is Jean's last meeting with us. The council, and I hope the residents, offer her a great thank you for the effort and the energy she's put into the last 10 years, and I will stress that out. And the council has, by vote, offered, according to your contract, a small emolument that I am pleased
very thoughtful
to give to you at this moment. Also, as a resident and council member, I want to thank the two departing council members, John and Josh, and I can say that they have offered great advice, counsel, and suggestions and discussions in the last 2 years, and I have certainly welcomed their contributions at many ventures and many different departures here. They have, I think, saved us all from embarrassment and going down wrong paths by their very good advice. So I want to thank them for their participation for the past 2 years. And with that, let's turn to any comments from the rest of the residents.
I'd like to comment very briefly here, Arthur. I'd like to thank Gene. And I'm speaking on behalf of my street, all of Turner Lane. I've only got one representative here with Ted. He's asked me to say something here, and I think that the job that Jean did since she came in here in October of '06 has been outstanding. And I love Jean. And I think a lot of people echo those sentiments. God bless Jean.
Thank you, Keith. That's very kind of you.
Any other comments? Yes.
Hi, my name is Naomi Nyerman. I don't think I know any of you. I live on Quincy Street. I've lived here for 30 years. Happy as a lark. Very pleased with the services that were delivered at my doorstep all the way. Very courteous, prompt staff. 30 years of satisfied consumer. But I'm not so much as a resident who cares about governance. And having worked for 40 years with nonprofit organizations, I think all of us high achievers who like to get A's wouldn't get an A in governance. And so I would like to propose that we start thinking about an A+ kind of governance infrastructure that we can really be proud of. That practices, that raises the bar to best practices. There are best practices for nonprofits or quasi-governmental agencies like these, and I think we can find them and make sure that we are really above par when it comes to quality of governance and competency in governance. And I think what I'd like to do is put into the record a memo that was written to start kind of identifying what some of the governance issues are so that we can use it as a roadmap to test to see whether we're doing okay by it, are these some of resolved, what do we need to resolve it in the future, etc. And this is a memo that was written by Steve Trowan of the Committee on Elections and Ethics. And I'd like to submit that and propose that the council hire an outside reviewer to use this as a roadmap, plus other management and operations issues that we want to take stock of, so that we know where we are, and then we devise a plan going forward.
Good.
I think that's, I appreciate your remarks, but I think for the council to entertain that, accept it for the record, other than what you've said, is, I think, not a wise course of action for a number of reasons, but I won't go into them now.
Be- mhm. Is there any reason why you can't go into them?
Frankly, because of personalities, and I think that we've been through a rather, I wouldn't say traumatic, but for this community, a more disruptive election than we've had in a number of years. Quite frankly, the issues were on personalities, and I think that the record will show that the performance of our village manager compared to any other government entity, including Montgomery County in the state of Maryland, we have ranked at the absolute top. And there are people who have their differences of opinion, and they're entitled to their differences of opinion, and I respect that. But I think to embody those differences of opinion into a course of action at this time would be a mistake for this council. I'm a lame duck, so what I have to say is here, and that's it.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Residential comments? No? Okay, and let's
I have
move.
a
Sorry,
question.
Josh, go ahead.
Do we have a record of documents from each council meeting? Is there's a, I'm not aware of it, actually.
Oh, what do you mean a record of
She
documents?
wouldn't put it into the
Into-
record, so I thought, is there a record?
Why don't you
of
make
that?
a note, what was the, I think we've all have received that email.
I have
What?
copies of it here.
Yeah.
I'll take one, please.
Yeah.
It can,
Yeah, I'd like
it can
one.
be.
And could you just say for the record, what was the date of the email?
May 7th.
Okay.
I'll
Well, I
see
have
this
that
from
email.
Malala.
Please.
Sure, all right. So,
Yeah, let me have it so it can go into the minutes. That's the
so
record.
there are minutes.
Well, there's minutes.
Yeah.
But the minutes, I wasn't aware it included documents, but I guess it could, right?
Thank you.
Just skip
Yeah.
them right to the minutes.
Thank you. Whoops. Okay, then, let's move on to the next minutes. Financial matters, we have, John, we have a number of end-of-year budget amendments. This is the last meeting of the fiscal year, which begins, the new fiscal year begins July 1st. And it's customary that when we have mainly expenditure items that deviate from what we had planned, we make amendments to bring these into agreement. So John, do you want to go forward with that?
Do you want to do that, John, or do you want to start with the financial report? We have it in the order of the book.
Right.
It's financial report.
Financial report.
Okay.
The order is
Just
financial
simply-
report,
Right.
action on the financial report,
Right.
and then moving from
Village
there.
finances, as I say, continue on course, and expenditures are within budget limits. And we are running a substantial surplus, but that is mostly for the designated work that we have ahead of us and that the new council will have to deal with. I move acceptance of the treasurer's report.
Second.
All right.
Do I hear everybody voting aye?
Yes.
All
Yes.
in favor? Okay.
We do have some end of the year budget amendments.
They're in
Those
there.
are in the packet of information in your books. You'll find that after the Dan Baden reports.
Okay. Okay.
It's mostly good news. Income tax receipts are 100,000 greater than anticipated a year ago. Real property tax receipts were up 8,000, and the holiday fund collected 1183 more than planned for a total of $109,183. That's the increase in our revenue adjustments. On expenditure adjustments, the largest one was for $20,000 for legal fees. We had a lot of questions this year. Second was snow plowing, another $10,000 for that.
We got a lot of snow on both of
Right,
these.
that's right.
And then there are just several minor adjustments to waste collection $4,500. Insurance was up $3,600. That's largely because of our new police officers. Office expenses were $1,000 more, and the holiday fund was $920. Pepco lighting was $2,000. The total expenditures were $42,020, so that leaves us with a net surplus going to unreserved funds of $6,763. I move the acceptance of the proposed
I'm sorry, John,
budget.
you said it leaves us with an addition to the unreserved funds of
67,000.
1,000. Okay, thank you. Just want to make
Right.
sure that when we go to listen to the tape, we make sure that we're
Okay.
consistent here.
I think I can just move we accept these budget adjustments in bank.
Okay, I need a second.
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Good. And did you want to discuss the implication of that Supreme Court?
Yes, I have that too.
Beyond his own
Oh,
windfall.
the Wynn case. I have a brief summary of the actual dollar impact.
I think everybody's got it. Oh,
Everybody's got
you
it.
added that? Okay.
I added
No, but
it up.
here on this,
Have what the interest is and what it all comes out to. But the basic thing is our total cost is going to be
Why don't we go
about,
into background?
this.
Fill us all in.
Well, this case dealt with a challenge to a change that the Maryland legislature made to the state income tax law. And as you notice on your Maryland form, the state tax is figured out separately, and then there's another block that figures out the local income tax that is for the county and therefore incorporated into the county of Martin's addition. And if you pay attention to your deductions and whatnot, you will notice that some of your deductions are not taken against your obligations that you, or the amount of income that the county, the local jurisdictions, or the piggyback tax is going to hit. So that's what the Wynn case was about, and said, no, you have to be parallel with what the state does, and you have to allow those deductions. So there is it means Martin's addition, along with Montgomery County, has, I wouldn't say significant, but you'll notice it. Revenues that they're going to have to pay to taxpayers here. That is, we will lose those revenues and be charged that by the state, I presume.
We can
And,
pay in a lump sum payment, or as I understand, work out a payment plan through deductions in
Yeah,
revenue
as
payments.
far as the taxpayer who receives this is concerned, they'll get their money straight from the state. The obligation is how does Martin's addition repay the state? Well, obviously, slowly and parsimoniously.
And painfully.
well, my
We don't
understanding,
owe interest.
my-
do we?
Correct.
but it's
Yeah.
only 3%.
Wait.
My understanding, Ron,
$375.
if correct me if I'm wrong, is that the numbers that are on that form are not what we owe. That those are the obligations that the state so far has said. These monies,
Okay.
these monies have the potential, because the people actually have to file a amended return. Once they do that, and once they're identified as Martin's Additions residents, which is something it would be nice if we could keep our fingers on, but I'm not so sure we can, that we actually, since we get 17% of the state, it's not that the obligation is 100% of what you're looking at. It's going to be 17% plus the interest,
Okay.
because the
So-
state gives us 17% of their income that's assignable to us. So one of the challenges we face is having any sense of what it is we're going to actually owe. I think one of the most interesting things to do is actually, I provided for you a list of the 2009 through 2013 obligations, or really income that's not properly been deducted from the tax obligation. Look at how Martin's Addition stands up to a lot of the other jurisdictions. I think it's very interesting. Chevy Chase View, for example, which we always think of as a much bigger and much wealthier, I mean, land-wise, community than us, and yet in 2009, their obligation is about $8,000, or the money that's been flagged is about $8,000 less. Section 5, neighboring communities, they're $13,000 versus our $22,000. Section 3, $17,000. I just think it's interesting. And John, you and I had that conversation about what's the difference in the makeup of the source of earned income that makes us so different. And actually, look at 2010 on up to 2013. By 2013, we're up to $48,000, and we're playing with the big boys by then.
Yes.
So we've gone from playing with the little guys to playing with the big boys.
What is this?
But I understand it's very speculative because,
Yes.
as Gene said, the individual resident that is due this credit has to file the amended return. The state is not going to proactively reimburse these amounts. And as a general matter, the 3-year statute of limitations limits you to going back 3 years unless you filed a protective claim at the time
Already.
the lawsuit
That's right.
was initiated. And then you can go back 6 or 7 years, I believe.
Prior to 2012, right?
Or is it
So,
I understand it was 2013.
so the amount here for 2013, which is the most recent one,
2013?
Yeah, that's
is 48,000. So at the most, it would be 17% of that,
plus
plus interest.
Well, interest between then and now.
I
is
don't
not-
read what was sent to us as saying that was what the county's, that's the part that's attributed to Martin's Addition, so that's our income.
Right, but we don't. That's our
the
income, but
income.
that's the income to the state, and the state pays us back
Okay,
only 17%.
17%.
But you know what?
Okay.
All of it is still up in the air. As a matter of fact, if you'll notice on that letter, there's a conference call on the 25th of June with the state representatives. Thursday, the 25th at 2 o'clock, and I would urge, if a contingent wants to come here to the office and make the conference call and listen in, I think that's going to provide a lot of clarity.
Okay.
And I would urge you to do that.
Can I just ask for clarification? These numbers came from the state?
They came from the Maryland Municipal League, and they were provided to them by the state.
Okay.
Okay. So we have to be ready to see how this all evolves.
Stay on top of it for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, John. Next item.
Minutes.
Okay, we have minutes from a couple of previous meetings that we have reviewed online and by email and approved. But for the record, can I have two motions? One to approve the minutes for the meeting of March 19th, which we've gone on and on about. It's now 2 months later, March, April, May, almost 3 months later. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Motion to approve the March
Okay,
19th.
Second. Okay, aye.
Aye.
And for May 14th, that was the annual meeting, the last meeting. And we've also had a chance to look at that. We've had a few comments on typos and other things. A motion to approve that one?
Make a motion to approve the meetings from,
Okay.
minutes from the annual meeting.
Good. I will second that.
Aye.
Votes aye. Okay. John, you approve that?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Great. God, we finally got those off the table. Building managers report.
Ron, you wanted to say something?
Just real quick, Arthur.
Okay, what?
So for the minutes that will be prepared for tonight's meeting, we'll
Yeah.
also need to add minutes for the executive session that was held, was it last week?
Oh, okay.
Just a
And-
reminder.
Tuesday. We have two.
Was right.
Okay.
Okay, I'll make a note here that the executive session minutes
Right.
must be prepared.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, building administrators report.
Right.
If you'd like, I can read it individually, project by project, or if you're just
What are the high points?
the high
Or
points.
and low
okay.
points, and low points.
Okay, high point. Well, how about just points in general? We've got a couple of projects townwide that seem to be sitting on hold, and they're challenged because you never know when somebody's going to pop up and say, "Quick, I want my permit," and it's hard to be ready for them. 7315 Delfield is one of them, where we've received several inquiries about what they can and can't do, and yet nothing's really come through in terms of the paperwork. We also have something on Bradley like that there have been architects, there have been Alan Beal, our building administrator, has reviewed them. We've gotten clearance, and yet we're not getting anywhere. We also have a swimming pool on Cummings Lane, where we've seen the plans, the county has approved it, and yet no further action on the part of the residents. And these become problematic to the extent that this is a very big project. And I've provided notice, as we're required to the neighbors, and the further we get out from when the notice was provided and when work begins, the more residents have a tendency to sort of forget that they got notice. So I even go to the extent of calling the builder, and the builder says, well, there's just nothing to say yet. So that's a problem from a management standpoint. Generally, we have some minor things that we do every month, fences, minor decks, stuff like that. You can find them throughout the different categories of things that are underway, and permits have been issued and construction continues. Some things are clearing up or on Raymond Street, which will be nice. 3511 Raymond Street is completed, and the bond has been returned. 3513, the Keating House, I think you're all familiar with that. They're getting close to being finished. Delfield, the project on Delfield continues. I don't know if it will ever be finished, but it's certainly been a challenge. That's the one that's, with a very narrow lot, a very narrow street. We have another project on 3505 Raymond seems to be on hold. And you can see here the projects that have been completed and some that have been closed. The difference between completed and closed is whether or not the bond has been returned. The other municipal support projects continue sort of as usual every month. I will tell you we've had tremendous requests for parking controls in and out, both for utility installations as well as construction site management, as well as moving in and out of the community, trying to stay on top of those things to make sure that the streets are kept open at all times, which is very, very important. Is a challenge sometimes. And like some of the problematic construction sites, we often post no parking signs only to find out that the people's plans have changed and we have to redo it all. So that's about the summary of the projects. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions on that?
To
Any of those?
answer them.
I have to admit, I had raised an issue with our building review person about a neighboring house going up, where new stairs alongside of it looked as though that they were practically on top of the fence, and I knew that there has to be a certain setback between stairs and the fence. So it was measured. It was within an inch of. It was okay. It was legal. It was conforming. But there is a tendency, we've noted many times here, of new construction to build out to the maximum extent possible, constrained under our code, which kind of indicates if we didn't have our code, which is more constraining than the county code, that the houses would be even larger. And so it's another indicator that the people who worked on the building code, including one of our council members who's not here today, they deserve a hand in coming up with something that was been improved. And it certainly allows very large, in my estimation, very large houses on the lots. And some of the builders are taking
What was
advantage.
that? What was the address on that house?
That was 35...
Is that 3513?
13 Raymond
Okay.
Street.
And the question was in regard to
A side stairway.
Upstairs, okay.
From my untutored eye,
Mm-hmm.
it looked like it was imposing or going into the
Well, it can go into the setback for 5 feet.
for
so-
5 feet,
right,
and
right.
it was up to the inch.
Oh, good, well,
Everyone, this was
means somebody's measuring,
they carefully
measuring
measured.
properly, that's good.
They knew where they were.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Moving on. We have introduced an ordinance before in April to amend the code to make the size of the election and ethics committee that's stated in the code to make it consistent with the charter. And was something that had evaded our notice for a long time. The charter says the election and the election committee shall be three members. The code said
Code said 3, charter said a minimum of 3.
A minimum of 3, right. I'm getting confusing myself here. And so we wanted to bring the two of them into consistency because there were questions of interpretation and it was confusing. That was introduced in April, and now it is here for the final vote. Now, one of our council members has suggested a friendly amendment, is that the phrase?
Yeah.
To separate the election and ethics committees into two.
Well, and the history on that just is that
Could you define a friendly amendment for me? Because I'm not familiar with
This
that.
is a
this is Ron had raised earlier. Friendly might not be the technical term, but
Okay.
a non-substantive, so we wouldn't have to restart the clock.
And how do you define non-substantive?
yeah. That's
I will ask
the issue.
the attorney.
That's the
to-
issue. Yeah, it probably is substantive, but the issue has been that the
Wait, can I finish
Yeah,
with the
go- oh, sorry.
definition?
Oh, sorry.
I got to keep the record straight
Okay.
here. Ron, friendly, non-substantive. Can we just
you
define
had
that?
some
wanna wait?
examples.
Sure, the charter requires us to introduce an ordinance for public consumption before we adopt it. The purpose is, of course, to allow the public an opportunity to read it, come and give us their comments. So what we act on tonight should be what is introduced to the public. Obviously, in between the introduction and the public hearing and action, we may recognize the need for changes in some areas, after we've had our own opportunity to deliberate on the ordinance. Some changes that can be made such that the ordinance does not have to be reintroduced to the public are what I call non-substantive. Sometimes, for example, if we're imposing a requirement for action to be taken within 10 days, and we decide, well, let's make it 15 days. We're adding more time. It's probably something that doesn't need to be reintroduced for the public. They've already got the ordinance. They already understand that there's a time limit. If we just add or subtract a few days, not a big deal. Or if we're making stylistic changes, changing the wording, adding a comma here or there. Separating the ethics committee and the elections committee into two committees may be substantive. I know Mr. Schmall's here tonight to provide comments.
So just before we go any further, the
Thank you for that
history that
definition.
the history that I learned in this process was the charter talks about the elections committee, and it talks about the number of members and the duties of the elections committee. And then a few years ago, the state required us to have some ethics language added to our code. So at the time, the simplest, quickest fix was to make an election and ethics committee title, and then all that comes in the code is just what we need to comply with the state ethics requirements. So the two different missions weren't addressed. It was just use the title election and ethics in the code. So my recommendation, and this is based off of some counsel we were provided during the past election process, would be to sever the two, and that it's common for the two to be severed so that there is an elections committee as prescribed in the charter, shall be a minimum of 3, so there's no 3 cap, and then you have the requirements for the elections committee in the charter, and then the code, if this amendment were considered, would be there would be an ethics committee shall have a minimum of 3. So again, no cap, and then all of the requirements for the ethics committee would be in the code.
Would you need a charter amendment for the ethics committee? 'Cause
No,
what you would have would
no.
be the election.
Yeah, so with Tiffany's proposal, the elections committee, their provisions would revert back to what's in the charter. The charter would not need to be changed. The code would need to be changed to sever the elections duties from the ethical duties.
But would
of
the charter
committee.
need a reference to the
No.
to a ethics committee?
No.
Okay, so that just can sit in the code. It wouldn't matter.
Correct.
What would be the mission of the Ethics Committee?
Currently, the duties are providing advisory opinions on conflicts of financial interest. The ethical provisions in our code are very brief. We have a somewhat minimum ethics ordinance. We are in fact exempt from the state ethic laws because of our size. But as Tiffany said years ago, and I don't know how many years ago, maybe Gene knows or maybe Richard knows, when the ethics laws were actually added to the code.
No one can remember. They
But-
kind of appeared sometime.
Well, I think we could probably find
But-
out.
yeah, but-
I would
but-
well imagine it's
yeah,
got
but
I believe
in
it.
place.
Actually,
Right.
now, I believe seeing a letter from Mike Zielinski from 1980 something
Huh.
requesting exemption from the state
From the
law.
state,
But as Tiffany said, at that time, the council recognized we need our own ethics laws as well, and as a matter of convenience, as Tiffany said, the two bodies were just merged into one. So, to answer your question, John, right now it's reviewing conflicts of financial interest, basically.
It's like,
So, and how would it do that?
Here's
For example, let's say we're
Council
bidding
members
out.
have to file
if your
financial
no, if
disclosure
your
No.
brother-in-law wanted to collect the trash,
Well, no, we're talking
Yeah.
about what the
Ethics.
ethics committee
right.
is going to do. They're going to sit down. They have a mission. What is their mission?
to
Yeah, that's,
adjudicate that code.
well, let me see,
Well, who
section
brings?
section 2101 as well.
I think what I'm trying to express is that
Yes.
when we create a body,
they need to have a function.
it takes on its own life, and that can be good or it can be bad. But I think that having a committee that's just solely concentrating on ethics, and quite frankly, in my opinion, in our small village, is asking for some controversy. If that's what the council wants, be my guest.
I share John's concerns. I'm not sure what problem we're addressing by creating a standalone ethics committee. I know there was one ethics question that came up this year. In the history of the village, was there another question?
That's the only one I know of.
Yeah, not in my 9 years.
But they
that
do
I
have
can
a
recall.
charge. The code has
Yes.
a few things listed in it that they're responsible
Right.
for.
Basically, it's providing advisory opinions and making determinations, but frankly,
On things like
as we noted when the ethical complaint was raised this year, those provisions in the code aren't really clear either. We have some issues needing cleaning up in the code. Some of our regulations date back to the time that the village was a special taxing district. The ethical committee is supposed to have rules of procedure governing what they're supposed to do if they're asked for an advisory opinion, and there are no current procedures.
What do other towns do, Ron, in terms of the ethics and elections? I know there's a huge issue going on in the town of Chevy Chase right now.
Yes, well,
And they're dealing with some election and ethical challenges. How
Right.
are they handling that?
The
What
town
do
of
other
Chevy
towns
Chase
do?
is a client of mine. Unlike Martin's Additions, based on the size of the town of Chevy Chase, they are subject to the state ethic laws. So they are obligated under state law to have a separate ethics commission to, in addition to providing
there's
advisory
that
opinions
precedent.
and reviewing conflicts of interest, also reviewing financial disclosure statements that must be filed.
And are they separate from their election committee?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Unlike John, I'm not going to let this rest. I'm going to oppose it. Because of the principle I've expressed other times. If one bad thing happens once, we don't necessarily need to create a process. We got through this ethics issue that arose, and I would be more comfortable with going the way things were, because at some point we may not get 8 volunteers to be on the committee, and someone may have the hard task of approaching neighbors and saying, we have an ethics committee. Would you like to rule on your neighbor's ethics? And they may be hard pressed to find residents that will undertake that mission. So I think we create problems by creating a standalone ethics committee.
Let
I
me-
can complete my answer to Gene's
Right,
question
yeah.
as well. I haven't prepared to answer this question. I haven't done a survey, but just off the top of my head, my other clients, Section 3, Section 5, I don't think either one of those has an ethics committee. As
Chevy
John-
Chase View?
Chevy Chase View does not. These are all small towns,
right.
and fortunate
But
to
what did
not
they do
have.
to comply with the?
They're all exempt. Yeah.
Okay.
But they're exempt from the formal requirements of the state. But
Right.
they don't. Isn't there a requirement to have your own ethics?
There is not.
Code.
There is
No,
not.
neither.
However,
Why did we
either.
have something?
Oh,
even though you're not obligated to follow the state law,
right.
most towns, I think all my towns, have an ethical code because it's good government.
Well, that's what I mean. There is a code
Yes.
without a committee.
Right. And even if there wasn't a code,
Yeah.
you've all
Yes,
got common law and fiduciary obligations to
Right.
avoid conflicts of interest.
watch your brother-in-law
having
in
it
the
in the
trash.
code is just embodying standards that,
Okay. So I suggest tabling this and
I just
going
want
into
to respond
fuller
to the one thing
discussion.
Josh
Go
says,
ahead.
that this is not, for me, it's not a response to one thing. They're two divergent missions. And if you have to have one looking after the other, but they're the same entity, or if you have to have an ethics committee that is appointed by the council, yet looking at someone that may be being elected to be on the next council, it makes it very difficult for them. So,
Yeah.
my thought is to separate the two so as to not put people in those tougher situations. But
Okay.
if it needs to be tabled,
Yeah, I think this deserves greater consideration, and including the possibility that do we need an elections committee, an ethics committee at all? If the code and fiduciary responsibilities and state law are already there, and we have our own code on ethics, do we need to have a committee to oversee this? I think all this we can be considering at a later time.
Well, it was, functionally, it's useful to have a body to refer a serious ethical matter to when it comes up.
Yeah.
And that's the function of the election and ethics committee. But
and the ethical piece was focused on council, village staff, not
Right.
neighbor.
Correct.
Not what?
So his concern about, I have an issue with my neighbor, is not the role of the
No,
ethics
no.
committee.
No.
The ethics function
Not as the code is written.
is focused on council members and staff.
Right.
But the ethics committee just issued an opinion on what a resident the chair of the council was going to do, so it might just fall again into their lap. But Richard, would you, as a council member, like to say anything on this issue?
I think, no.
All right.
Okay.
I'm fine with tabling it.
Okay. I would like to have it come up again at perhaps the next meeting so that we can begin a full-scale discussion of this. I think Tiffany raises some interesting, important points, and I think you've raised points about Ron has raised points about whether it's been
Benefits.
benefit, and I think we should have a discussion
Well,
on
I
it.
just,
Would you like
I
a-
move to pass over it at this
At
meeting.
the
Deal with
Passover,
it the next-
okay,
For the July agenda,
yeah.
would you like a comparison table of the other
Oh,
local
that would be-
towns,
that would be
what they do?
Yeah,
Especially the smaller one.
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'd like to, what do, if there's anything we have to have,
Okay.
and things that we are nice to have,
Right.
there's a delineation between
Right.
those two things.
I'll second John's motion.
Good, thank you. But
Do we
okay.
need a motion on that?
No, we
or
don't-
is
I don't
that
think
just-
we
No,
need
it
a
was just a
motion.
discussion.
But
we're
we
gonna,
do-
We're going to take action on this.
Oh, but,
We
but we
still
do
have
have
to
to
take
have
action.
and we have to have a public hearing on the ordinance.
We still have to go back to the original ordinance.
Right.
Right.
The second hearing, the second reading of it. And that is in here under
Five.
That's it.
item 5. And there is, on these 2 pages of whereases, there is one line that changes one word or 2 words to the code. It says, and I'll read it, there shall be a village election and ethics committee which shall be composed of a minimum of 3 members. The minimum of are the 3 words that we are considering here. We've already talked about this and approved it once before, and I move that we,
No,
You
you can't. You have to hear it.
we have to read the whole thing?
We
No,
have
they have to
Provide
take
public comments.
Oh, public comments,
Yes.
oh, okay.
And would you like to, Steve?
Yeah, I might as well.
And Arthur, would you like them to come up
Steve Schmall,
or?
Summit Avenue.
That should pick it up.
Yeah.
I think at one point I was probably inclined to say, why bother with this at all? I'm still somewhat inclined in that direction. I understand that clearly the charter says one thing, which is broader, and the ordinances say something that's more restrictive. I guess my part of my thought is that if it's legal to have what we have in the ordinances, even though it's more restrictive, I don't think we've had a problem in all the years that we've had the ordinance in place with having an elections and ethics committee of 3 people. I see some potential danger down the road if somebody says, well, maybe we should, probably it'll be an odd number, 5 or 7, that we may be able to find, thank goodness, residents who would be willing to serve. But the larger the committee, the more difficult it is to manage any sort of volunteer entity. And given the fact that I don't think anything is broke, I don't know whether it needs fixing.
Let me respond to that for a moment. The thing that was broke was the inconsistency. And reading one book of the Bible, we at one time had 4 members that was in violation of the code. So this would make it clear, we wouldn't be confused about, are we looking at reading the charter or reading the code? It would make consistency here. And it was inadvertent. Everyone remembered one phrase but hadn't really refreshed their memory on the other phrase. So this would make it consistent, and that's essentially the main point of doing all this.
I had a question. When Ron explained to us before, charter is charter and code is, your statement of policy. Was there a reason that anybody remembers that it said shall be 3?
It predates me, but just respond to what you said. So the charter is like your constitution. It's your framework of government. Your code of ordinances is your law.
Mm-hmm.
So your laws can't conflict with your charter. But because the charter gives you discretion to choose the size of the committee, you can limit that discretion with your code. And I think a prior council must have decided we want to limit the discretion and keep the size to 3. However, as Arthur pointed out, the committee was composed of 4 somehow, and I think it was Frank Correll, the chair of the elections committee, who suggested that the council have flexibility to make it larger than 3 if it so chose, because with scheduling conflicts, sometimes it's hard to get even a quorum of 2 to meetings.
Yeah, so, any other comments here? I see one comment from the
Yeah,
floor.
Mark Wiener,
Right.
Thornapple Street. Just briefly, I think in a small community like we have, we should do everything we can to encourage volunteers. If there are enough people that choose to serve on a committee and volunteer, I don't think we should do anything to restrict that. My interpretation of what the committee responsibilities were all about didn't seem controversial. There was work involved. Sometimes people have conflicts. I think it makes perfect sense to allow it to be consistent at a minimum of 3.
Good, thank you. Okay, so any other comments from residents? Okay, we are ready then to move this for the second time. Anyone want to make a motion? I can, go ahead, Joe.
How do you do it?
We'll make a motion that we adopt the ordinance number 04-15-3, introduced April 23rd of this year.
I second.
Aye.
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 Okay. Tiffany, was that I abstain or no?
No,
Okay,
aye.
I didn't hear. Okay. And so given that, the effective date will be July 3rd, 2015. Thank you. And next month we will return to this question.
It'd be a different question.
Yeah, different question. Okay. Okay, we've done that. We are now on to a variety of issues that come up. First, Ron, why don't you go through the Comcast agreement?
Okay.
See if you can keep it to under an
Well,
hour.
well,
Oh, God. It is so complicated.
I'll keep it quick, and actually, I'm glad Richard is here, because these negotiations probably began when Richard was last on the council.
Sadly.
So Comcast, Verizon, RCN, they operate their cable operations pursuant to a franchise. State law says we have to allow them to operate in our jurisdiction, but we can impose reasonable restrictions, include collecting a franchise fee. Comcast's 15-year agreement lapsed 2 years ago, and we've been negotiating a renewal. Montgomery County takes the lead in the negotiations and negotiates on behalf of all the participating municipalities. I keep tabs on the community negotiations, and to the extent Martin's Additions or any of my other clients wants to assert something to be included in the agreement, we do that. At this point, we're pretty fatigued, and I've just
Absolutely.
said, show us your proposal, county. The county has concluded its negotiations, but its lead negotiator, is now reaching out individually, trying to see, what is it that you want, what is it that you want, and myself and another attorney who's representing some other towns have just said, let's not try and do this separately. Just show us your proposal. We'll all meet together. We should all know what's being offered to everyone else. And some terms have to be collaboratively negotiated. At this point, the items that are the sticking point likely are going to be, how is the public educational grant going to be split up? So there are provisions in the franchise agreement that obligate Comcast to provide a grant for the operation of public cable channels.
WVMA. We can start our own.
Sure, exactly.
Great.
So the Maryland Municipal Cable is an entity that was created by the
Oh,
participating.
that, I couldn't figure out what MCC was.
Yes,
in your
they are an
memo.
entity that was
Maryland
created
Municipal
years
LLC.
ago.
Do
to
they have
spend-
a timeline in which they have to give you a proposal or no?
No, I mean we're
We're 2 years now, right?
right. Yeah, what? I forget the number of months we're out now, but
But does it, go ahead.
So that there are a couple issues that have to be worked out. Not big issues for Martin's Editions because
Right.
we're not currently operating a cable channel. But we may still have an interest in making sure MMC gets its fair share on behalf of Martin's Editions. Because if you wanted to, you could be operating programming and MMC would put that on for you. And they were established years ago to spend these grant funds, and they do operate some impressive programming. And if you've been down to their studio, it's pretty nice. There are jurisdictions that do a lot of programming in Rockville, Tacoma Park.
But
A lot of council members say, I don't want to be on TV and
right. But essentially,
not in high def.
if we don't have much of a dog in this race. Is that the right cliche?
Yeah.
It's kind of peripheral to our
Horse race.
main interest.
Right, and so if you would have seen my last email,
Right.
it was, please just give us your proposal and let's wrap this up.
Right.
We don't need another conference call at this
Okay.
point. I don't need another.
Did you have a?
Are we still getting revenues?
Yes.
But
So the revenue stream did not stop
that's the
during these
franchise.
negotiations?
Exactly.
Right.
The current contract, well, the expired contract is continuing until we negotiate
Okay.
the new contract.
So we still receive the franchise
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
fee.
Any chance we're gonna get more?
No, the
No.
franchise fee is going to
Sti-
stay at its maximum, which is 5%
Mhm.
of the profit derived from subscribers in our jurisdiction. And the county then takes 3% of that to operate the cable complaint office and to enforce cable laws in our jurisdiction.
Thank you.
Horse race.
We've already spent too much time on this issue.
Yeah.
Unless
Poor
anyone
Ron.
is deeply interested. Okay, let's move on. Our insurance.
Well, you've got included in your packet, I submitted the insurance request to Legit. I
Yeah.
attended that meeting. I've filed for all additional coverage we can get at no cost. I included that there's a cover letter, Tim's Corner, that talks about the effect of the Government Tort Claims Act change from $200,000 to $400,000. And the big question there is how will the increase impact our insurance rate? They're guessing at about 3%. So
Oh,
if you look at it, our coverage is unchanged, although we
Right.
did take on some criminal coverage for cyber crimes. So in other words, if we get hacked and we end up in trouble, and it was just a free addition to their packet. So if you look at this packet, you can see the long list of all the things that we're covered for. It's no different from last year.
unmanned aircraft. That looks like.
And the
I don't
fungus.
remember that
like
one.
the fungus endorsement actually. So,
Okay.
but obviously, you guys have to be on top of it and aware of it. This has been submitted. The request has been submitted. The renewal coverage is being reviewed, and I don't expect there should be any complication at all. But obviously, it's very.
So they're
important.
saying they're estimating something like 3%.
Yeah,
for all
it's not
this.
going to be much for
Huh,
us.
that's
Okay.
good. Yeah.
But you obviously.
When we saw all those required changes, I thought it might be higher.
Well, yeah,
Is that-
this is a change that MML did fight pretty aggressively. Ultimately, the impact is not that drastic. The existing limits in the Tort Claims Act date back to the 80s. They haven't been raised for decades, and so it was probably
Update.
time, frankly.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And the difference in insurance and insuring yourself from 200 to 500,000 is not that
Yeah.
much.
Okay. Great.
All right, so consider
Good,
yourself so informed.
Yeah. Okay. Garbage.
And
That's the
we'll get
biggie.
the final thing soon. Yeah, garbage. I sent you all a
Right.
copy of
Right.
my summary of the contracts.
Right.
And I think by email I sent you copies of the
Yeah.
summaries of the contract. I have, if you want to look at them in detail.
Yeah.
I have
no.
actually,
Right.
probably don't need to. Anyway, so there it is.
Yeah,
You
and
see
your
my
summary.
recommendation, my
Right.
summary. My recommendation is
Right.
that you stick with waste management.
Right.
And I lay out some of the
Right.
analysis of why I think that's a
Yeah,
good idea.
Yeah, I see no reason not to. Anyone else have any comments?
You're saying waste management?
Waste management. We know them, their price is about right. The others are.
Well, it's
either-
unchanged from the current, they didn't
Right.
change it, the current price,
Right.
nor the first year out or the second year out, it's unchanged.
They're locking it for 2 years.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Actually, for 3 years from here, and then 2 more years
the
out.
competitors are cheaper and dirtier or much more expensive.
Yeah, and actually, Unity Disposal, I thought this was very interesting. I almost missed this in their contract proposal,
what?
that they are going to actually subcontract out the services were we to go on with them.
Oh, so they wouldn't actually do it, so it could
They
be.
would only supervise it.
Oh.
And from what I understand of a town that's using their subcontracted services,
Yeah.
it's nowhere near as good or as clean or as professional. The equipment's a lot older, so that sort of even diminishes more.
Good.
And obviously, the price differential is pretty substantial.
Right. Okay.
So I would
Go
entertain.
with it.
Let me have some action here.
Yeah, go.
I move
Somebody.
waste management.
Okay. And we have a second?
Yes, second.
Okay. Can I have a vote?
Aye.
Tiffany, did you vote yes on
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, moving on.
that? Next.
Ron's contract.
Well, proposal. Yeah.
His proposal.
It's included in there.
Yes.
Do you want to speak to it? Do you want me to speak?
Well, yeah, I can't represent you in this matter.
Conflict of interest,
Right.
you see?
But I would just note that my rate has remained unchanged for 2.5 years. I'm proposing a $15 an hour increase, which is still less. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's still less than what my rate was 2.5 years ago,
Right.
which was $15 higher than that.
He's a bargain.
And
Yep.
and it's $115 less than what my predecessor was charging in
Right.
what year was that?
I've been very
06,
satisfied
yeah.
with our legal counsel.
With our legal advice.
Very,
representation.
very impressed.
Yes. I approve.
Okay, so we have a motion to accept this agreement.
Yes, I move to
I'll
accept.
second that.
Arthur, Josh. Okay, vote.
Aye.
Okay, now on the
Okay.
accountant agreement,
Dan, okay.
his contract is written so that it basically just rolls over every year, and we have contracts like that. But I thought, and the contract is actually built that way. If you look at the last page before you get to the scope of services, it says, where is that? Hold on just a second. It basically says that unless we fire you, this contract will stay
In effect.
in effect, is what it's always been. I just thought, why not, because we've been trying to be more upright, out forthcoming, or make stuff that's been standard, put it out in the public eye a little bit. Let me go ahead and adjust the contract to actually introduce the year, even though it's not necessary. So that's why I included it here. Let me see if I can. Okay, here it is.
There.
If you look at for term, it says the contract shall be effective for 1 year, beginning July 1st, and that was July 1st of last year. This contract was renegotiated last year, so July 1st of 2014. And ending June 30th of the following year, the contract will renew year to year unless terminated as described in paragraph 12 and 13.
Mm-hmm.
So I just thought, well, let me go ahead and make this change so it's in the file that way, and it appears to be current. But there is no change, by the way, in his contract payment. It's exactly, scope of
Okay.
work is same, fee is the same as
So,
last
so
year.
the main change is a date
Just
up
a
on the
date,
first
that's all.
paragraph.
That's all.
Okay, good.
So if you guys, if it's okay
The
with
only
you.
question I have, and this is just for my
Mhm.
belated information, is that his report comes in the middle of the month
Mhm.
of the previous
Mhm.
month. So that the report I just prepared is actually for half of May.
Mhm.
We're well into half of June. And the discrepancy,
Well, actually, he's building his reports on May's records. He has to wait until he gets the bank statement from United Bank, the May statement, and the PNC statement at the end of May. So the report
But
he's devising...
I don't get a May 30th statement. It's a May 15th statement.
And yet, well, we'd have to talk to Dan about that. I will tell you, when he builds the treasurer's report, he's building it upon the records he has from the bank.
Yeah.
Now, I've noticed that PNC sometimes provides us with two statements. Sometimes they provide us with a middle of the month statement and an end of the month statement. So he could certainly clarify that, but he builds it on the latest information. I get it from the bank. PNC is very slow, and then I scan it and send it right off to him. But we could certainly...
Well, the other
Well, I
thing-
just, it's moot to me. But
Yeah, well,
it's
Well,
amazing.
the other issue that comes up is invoices, late invoices. So in terms of expenses, all we know is who sent in,
Yeah.
who sent their bills in. And some are regular and others are not.
Well, part of the concern is right now we're running these marvelous surpluses, so there's no real, we have the money to pay the
Right.
bills and there's no issue. But if the village ever decided to run a tight budget or needed to or something
We do
happened,
run a tight
they would have an issue
Yeah.
on bill payment and things like that, and we'd need to have more up-to-date information, I would think.
Well, he maintains a ledger, so I think if
Yeah.
you were concerned about more accurate information from that standpoint, one would refer to the ledger.
Right,
If you
right,
wanted
to the
to,
ledger.
before
Oh.
you made a decision about an
Right.
additional expense within a budget category, you would refer to the
Well,
ledger.
the new treasurer
You know,
can do that.
see, right.
Okay.
Okay, so we're okay there. Should we just
Yes.
let's get a motion?
To approve the.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Okay.
Somebody want to do it?
They're going to come from the treasurer? Yeah.
I move we approve the
He will,
contract.
and I'll second.
Okay. Vote.
Aye.
Okay, then for the code enforcement and municipal public works, that's Wayne. And this is, it's a part of what the functions he performs. This is from an earlier contract, 2003, as you can see. And I thought that it would be helpful for you guys to see.
2013.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
2013. I apologize. Thank you. I'd listen to the tape and go, what was I thinking? And I thought that it would be helpful for you to see this in writing. And the agreement that I have in the file is actually signed by Wayne and signed by me. This is a little bit more informal an approach than we've taken before, and largely because it was a subset of what Mid-Atlantic did. So, but I thought maybe in terms of your interests that you've expressed in moving forward and being even more open about this, that this would be a good place to start with what kinds of responsibilities they have and
Right.
what we've agreed to. So, there it is.
Good. Good. Put it all down. I like the availability 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah, and he is, and it's good. When
Right.
we have storms,
Right, he's
that's
out
the
there.
kind of stuff that's so important
Yeah.
for us. So, but that can serve as a kind of a good beginning for any kind of more formal arrangements you want to make with a change in the building administrator.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I don't think we need any kind of action on that, but
No.
just consider it information.
Okay, street lighting.
Street
We
lights.
just- first of all, how is Scott?
He's doing okay.
He's out on
He's
the
okay.
street.
He's out on the
measuring.
street.
Good.
Yep, and I sent you an email. I'm sorry it wasn't a little bit earlier, but obviously there's a lot of information involved in here
Yeah.
about what his findings were. The bottom line, I mean, it goes on for pages, you know,
Right.
and the illustrations of how things are illuminating and all this kind of stuff.
He's still not happy.
The bottom line, I think, is, and you can see it, that he's still not convinced that LEDs are the way to go. Now, it's
Or
not
these LEDs.
well, LEDs in general. He
Right.
says that the light function and metering and everything that had been recorded by the induction lights that the council originally looked at a couple of years ago, he still believes outdo anything he's seen in the way of LEDs. If you go to if you go to almost the bottom of page 1, he says, based on the 2 mock-ups we have done,
Yeah.
I believe that the new fixture, the 55 watt LED, which is the one we just put in, does a better job than the previous one. However, I don't see that the newer LED luminaires, or however you say it, are any better than the induction luminaries that were originally proposed that we looked at in Chevy Chase View. Remember our field trip up there?
Yeah.
At 55 watts each, the power consumption is the same. The color temperature is the same. The average light level is basically the same, and the glare from the QL fixture seems to be less at common viewing angles. Both sources have a replacement cycle of about 15 years. QL will probably be available for at least one more lamping cycle. I'm not so sure if that's a lifetime. We'd have to find out what he means by a lamping cycle. And after that, LED replacement modules will undoubtedly be available and of much higher quality. And he describes what he means by that than the presently available LED fixtures. So, what does this say? That our attempts to constantly see if we can't master the LED streetlight are not to his satisfaction.
Right.
He does say that he wants to come back another time, and he's going to bring an expert from Holophane, the manufacturers of these LEDs, to see if what his meters are reading are actually what Holophane believes the lights should have produced. So make sure that we got it right, that he's got it right. So he does want to come back and do that. So that's kind of where we're moving.
That's. I'm kind of surprised because there are city after city around the state, around the country, who've been putting LEDs in.
Right.
And I would have thought they would have gotten it right.
Well, one of the things he says in this, if you look at it, that it's such a function of the kind of neighborhood, the kind of lights you want, the kind of trees you have, this kind of stuff. There's so many factors that go into it. And he keeps going back to the induction bulb and saying, this gives us the kind of light for a residential community that he likes and that the council, when they had originally made that decision, had agreed to. So I think we're in a good place in terms of he's on top of it.
Right.
He's pulling in Holophane. Pepco's aware of it.
Yeah.
They've been working with us on it, and we'll be staying in touch with them.
Yeah. Any
questions?
Discussions on this?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that, I don't know when Scott did his initial work and when that initial council discussion was, but it was surprising to me when we did our trip to Chevy Chase Village, and they had done a mock-up of a bunch of different types of lights and different types of lamps as well. And, just the 5 council members walked away having very different opinions about how much light was too much light and what we would want in Martin's Additions. And I think that having that conversation amongst the council, but also having a outreach to the residents in a very systematic and organized way to which we can get their feedback.
He fully supports that, by the way. I had a conversation with him. He supports that, but he feels very strongly that not until he's completed his measurement of what's there, gotten an answer from Holophane, one of the things I suggested to him was to actually, when the time comes to begin to reach out and hear what people have to say about the streetlights, to prepare guidelines for people to look at, so that you're not just getting a sort of a knee-jerk, that's too bright or that's too dark. But I suggested that you set some parameters about look at the amount of cover and what the tree cover does and what it'll disperse, how it will disperse the light, so that we're getting a lot of good, educated information from the residents. And I will tell you what happened in Chevy Chase Village, and I'd hate to see us get to this point where there was so much contention and so much disagreement about the light and whether it was glare. They gave it up. They completely gave up redoing their lamping, their relamping, and now what they do is their policy is if somebody complains about a street light, they'll change it out on an individual basis. But my argument is, so I call up and I say, I don't like that street light in front of my house. I want you to change it. And my neighbor says, yeah, but I do. And so then what you've done is driven the debate from a high level of policy, elected officials, down to neighbor on neighbor. So that's not a great way to do business. But just so you know, they've tried it. Somerset, by the way, is very interested in our findings, and they would like to work with us. So I got them together, got that together for us. But I think you're right, Tiffany, and I have talked to him about it. He said he will do it when he feels that he's got everything analyzed himself and has the right answers. in terms of knowing what
Do
we're
they,
looking
does
at.
Somerset use Scott
No,
Watson?
they don't. They were
have
looking
that.
for a lighting engineer.
okay.
So I've
Okay.
shared with them this information.
Good,
So
good, okay.
that's
So I think
where we
just
are.
back to, there's the technical piece that Scott has provided and will continue to provide, which I think is very important. I think there's also just the personal preference and aesthetics piece that if we reach out to residents,